The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and over 25 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with a wonderful gentleman who is currently living in the Ohio area and spent some time in West Virginia. He's a businessman, entrepreneur, traveler, worked in construction, small business owner. He was also an instructional writer, also real estate developer, corporate executive, and he's currently the author of Beyond the Higher Ground, which is about working in construction of a prison in Appalachians and discovering something that has been going on for quite some time. And we're going to talk about what is the Southwest Virginia drug crisis as well, too, and what's discovered as well, too. This is his first novel. It's based off his experiences building a prison in West Virginia. It's gotten some great reviews, and he's looking forward to writing another novel. And Beyond the Higher Ground, ladies and gentlemen, live from the Ohio, West Virginia area where it's almost heaven, Thomas Brigger. Thomas, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Mike.
Yes, hello. And you wrote the book Beyond the Higher Ground. You're a businessman, entrepreneur, traveler, and this is also your first book. And before we get into all that, tell us how you first got started.
Well, it's interesting because I know I'm the guy who you always made. He never decided what he wanted to do when he grew up, as you can see by my bio. But,
Jack of all trades, master none. That's like many of us, including yours truly.
I'm still working at it. But I've always written. I've always written short stories mostly, and never really got around to publishing them. I used to write short stories, going back years ago, and send them to my sister. That's about where it is. So actually, one of my next projects is going to be is to publish some of the short stories. But what happened is I was doing a lot of traveling. I was in a hotel room in Cleveland, Ohio, finishing probably the worst novel I ever read. And I sat back and said, I could do that. So I started writing a novel, and I was traveling an awful lot back then. So you go into a hotel room, you want to stay out of the hotel bars. So I was starting just writing instead of reading, and over the period of about a year, I finished it one day, and I said, "Well, that was cool," and I set it aside. I just didn't consider myself a writer or anything. I just wrote a novel. Well, some years later, I had a personal situation where somebody close to me was affected by the opioid crisis, and I said, you know what, I'm going to publish this thing. So I took it out and sent it to publishers, and here we are. And it's I think it's a timely novel. It takes place in actually Southwest Virginia, which is kind of the area. It's hit worse with this opioid crisis because of the poverty and because of just lack of work and so forth down there. And it's a sad thing if you get down in the experience that I had in that area, actually seeing entire families hooked on drugs. It's sad. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wanted to draw attention to the opioid crisis in rural America. And I think the problem that so many of us have is we think of opioids, heroin, and so forth as being something that happens in big cities, with big drug pushers. And living right here in Ohio, I can tell you, it really has crept into the rural areas, and it's a ripe market for these cartels. Mm-hmm. So, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
What I didn't want to do is write an expose, because it's a wonderful area. It's wonderful people. They're afflicted by something they didn't deserve. Uh-huh. So I wrote the novel about a man's struggle to get over personal tragedies, and he's he's tasked with building this prison on top of a mountain in Southwest Virginia, in a rural area, and he sees this as his way of restarting his life. His wife has passed away. He had a horrible childhood. A lot of things happened to him. But once he gets into there, he comes across an awful lot of difficulties. He rents a house on the side of the mountain where the prison's going to be built, and things start happening to him right away. He's harassed constantly. Somebody blows up a gas can in his yard. Somebody shoots through his window, and he pretty well figures out that somebody wants him to get out of that house and get out of the area.
Really?
Yeah.
And is it because he exposed the opioids and the drug abuse in that area, or was it something he might have said that might have ticked him off or something?
Yeah, well, he stuck his nose where he shouldn't have done it. He moved into a house that somebody else wanted for particular reasons, and that's in the book. Uh-huh. And the person who wants it comes from a long line, a very noble line of moonshiners in the area, over 100 years of moonshiners. And he was the one who turned it around to being dope dealers. So,
wow.
And that's happens a lot. Uh-huh. So then what happens to him, though, is his prison construction site suddenly becomes a vehicle, a drop-off site for drugs. So what's happening, they're smuggling drugs through the prison and distributing them, a little bit at a time. And that really happens. I've actually seen that happen because when you have a large construction site, there's a lot of activity, a lot of material is moving in and out, in crates and so forth. Very hard to track anything. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they'll move these things in fairly large quantities, and they go out in lunch pails and toolboxes and whatever.
Wow.
And that's really how the book goes along, and it gets into a very suspenseful, a lot of intrigue, a lot of interest, but really pretty well talks about what really happens then and how these drugs actually get into that area. Uh-huh. And these poor people, in a lot of cases, what happens also is the drugs are fairly cheap now.
Mm-hmm. And of course, being a huge opioid problem, and I've talked to some people about this opioid situation, especially around the West Virginia and the Southwest Virginia areas. And of course, and I guess the big question is that, what do you think are the factors of having this huge opioid epidemic in that area? What is causing it? And I guess another question is, what can be done to stop?
Well, and you're right. And the causes are, I guess you could say there's a lot of causes and there's very few causes. In most of the cases that you find with people who are addicted to opioids, particularly to heroin, is they have an underlying reason for it. You have an operation or something, you get a prescription drugs, and the prescription runs out, and then you can go buy them on the street, but the pills are very expensive on the street. And what really has crept in to that area is into this area in Ohio and a lot of places as well, is this black tar heroin that comes from Mexico.
Wow.
And if you've ever read any books about it, really there is some interesting books out right now about it. But what happened is a little town in Mexico figured out how to make heroin a lot cheaper than the stuff that was coming from across the ocean. And that's what's feeding. So it's actually a line in the book where one of my characters says you can go down into Low Creek, Virginia, and buy heroin for about the same price as a hamburger. And so now that these poor people are just they're turning to it. In a lot of cases, it's just desperation. You don't have a job. Things run out on you. There's family problems. One problem begets another problem, and pretty much, I think you could probably go down in a lot of places down there and talk to anybody on the street, and they know somebody who has lost somebody due to these drugs.
And also, what is law enforcement doing about this, or is law enforcement basically overwhelmed by this whole opioid situation?
They're completely overwhelmed, because you can have a sheriff's office, which with plenty of people involved in it, but the tax base is so low, they just can't afford that much. So, and the other problem that you have is in all these rural areas, including the one I live here in Ohio, you're spread out so far. There's only so much you can do. I mean, just the distance alone is difficult. And there's some shocking things that you see. Actually, the book that I'm writing right now is centered in Ohio. And one of the examples I had doing research was two Amish boys in one of those carriages that they have, They got caught delivering black tar heroin.
Uh-oh.
I almost thought that it was a joke. I couldn't believe it. I actually saw that. So, but that's how deep it gets. And and like we said, the problem with it is law enforcement just can't keep up with it. And not only in that place, but in a lot of places. But when you have people spread out so far apart, and even in hard to get areas, you've done it myself. You ride down through those mountains there, and most of the residences and places are obscured. You can't even see them. So, how do you track that?
And you also said there's also the smuggling involved, through the prisons as well, too. And also, if the prison managed to get complete, and what happens after that point, like say the prison gets built, it's almost like, then what? Is it like build more prisons, hire more guards? Or...
Well, yeah, and that's an endemic problem. In the end of the book, the way things progress is as the plot progresses in the book, the prison's getting built, and so at the end of the book, the highest point of the whole area has a prison on top, and that's kind of the metaphor we have for beyond the higher ground. And the reason for the title of the book is, it's not an end game. When you get away from adversity, it's not necessarily over. Life goes on. People get off the drugs, and there's like a 40% recidivism rate where they come back on the drugs again.
Right.
So, and the way we have the title, I have the title because in the book, people are getting away from the river. The river's flooding, and they go to the higher ground. And Sally's father says, just don't matter. You just don't matter, Sally. He says, because you can get away from the river today and fall off a cliff tomorrow. And that's really kind of how it goes.
Right. Right, exactly. And we'll talk a little bit more about the book along with your short stories and what you got coming up and what you got interesting as well, too. But first, you listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and over 25 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author, businessman, entrepreneur, and traveler, one-time construction worker Thomas Brigger, the author of Beyond the Higher Ground here on the Mike Wagner Show. We talked about a good portion of the book, especially with the opioid epidemic based off experience building a prison in West Virginia. And, of course, Tucker Mason, wanting to start all over, his wife died and recurring demons of his childhood, and maybe a bit about his wife and what happened during his childhood that somehow led him down the trail of, getting on opioids and trying to get over this nightmare, trying to work on a prison.
Well, and that's just pretty close how it is. Actually, Tucker gets exposed to the opioids once he starts building the prison. He doesn't really get on them himself, but we do have a character there that he works through who is on the opioids and helps her get through that problem. Tucker's childhood, though, was spent with alcoholic parents, and the burden that he carries with him is the feeling that he was responsible for his brother's death when he was 7 years old, and he carried that all his life. But Tucker had a redemption when he got married, and he was able to talk that through, and he got over it. And then his wife was killed. So that's the burden that he carries into this to build this prison. So he buys this or rents this house on the side of the mountain where the prison is going to be built, and sits back and says, this is where I'm going to restart. It's going to restart my life. But again, that's this higher ground. Once you get to the higher ground, you still got life to live. And that's when he starts running into the people who are managing this drug trade. Not only the people who are trying to get him out of his house, but the cartel that is actually smuggling drugs through his construction site and sending them out. And those people are really brutal. And there are some brutal scenes in the book about how they treat each other and how they treat the people that deal with them.
And also too, this is also going a lot, similar stories throughout the West Virginia and in the Virginia area. And is this like the biggest area for opioids, or is this like other areas like say New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or is this like the opioid capital for like the West Virginia and Southwest Virginia area?
Well, actually, Southwest Virginia and West Virginia, in that whole area, including where I am right now in Ohio, is pretty much the center point. A lot of it comes through Ohio, right to a few miles from where I'm standing right now. And the reason being is the interstates make it so easy to get through here to get to other areas. Mm-hmm. So it's a good place to stop off and drop something in the area. So that's why really you get down into these other markets. When you look at the rural areas, it's a ripe market for the cartels because there's no mechanism set up to prevent it. Big cities have narcotics divisions and so forth. These sheriff's offices don't have that. They don't have any place to. If we found something here in Ohio, where I am in Waynesville, in Waynesville is south of Dayton and north of the cornfield. If we had something here, the DEA has an office in Columbus. Mm-hmm. It's 60 miles away, and probably is undermanned. So that's really it's a great market for them to come in and take over, and that's really in the book. We actually have a contractor for the cartel who is run by a woman who is very smart and very efficient and very ruthless, mm-hmm. and probably is reflective of so much of the people who are involved in that business. Mm-hmm. So,
right, and
she was so ruthless. I'm putting her in my next book too. So.
And what is the main message you want your readers to take from this book?
Number one is that it's getting away from adversity is not an end game. Uh-huh. It's just taking your next step. I wanted to expose and have some sensitivity to the opioid crisis in that area. and I also wanted to get the human side of it, and just the expression that we all have. We all have that sense of wanting to get away from things that are bad. If somebody wants to get off the drugs, somebody wants to to get over a death of somebody, so you find a way to get past the adversity. You move to the higher ground. But moving to the higher ground just means life goes on. It means you escape something, we keep going on. It's just not an end game.
Right.
Life goes on.
Right, exactly. We'll talk about your upcoming book in just a minute and some of your ventures, but first listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking for a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, over 25 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with author Thomas Brigger of Beyond the Higher Ground here on the Mike Wagner Show, talking about his book and the opioid epidemic in West Virginia and all the stories that go on with it. And from this first novel, that an instructor had said that potentially you become one of the greater writers of this century, and you decide to go on with another book, and you can just tell us more about that one.
Well, it's like I said, I live in Ohio, and I can see this going on. I moved here. I grew up in Ohio originally in the Cincinnati area, and then I spent quite a few years on the East Coast and came back, and I was a little bit shocked to see, especially coming to kind of a rural area where I'm at right now, a little shocked to see just how intense this opioid crisis is here. I wasn't surprised about it in Philadelphia, but I was shocked to come back and see how that's going on. So I thought, here's another place, the same situation that we have the first book, where you just don't have the law enforcement to prevent these things from happening. Mm-hmm. So I took this book, basically took a small village in Western Ohio, in the rural area of Western Ohio. And it's about a police chief who's about to retire. They're going to close the police department and let the sheriff's office take over, which happens a lot with these small villages. Mm-hmm. And a village in Ohio is basically depends on how many voters there are. So that's why they call it a village. It's not quite a town.
It sounds like most places, especially where I am at, it's like you shut down a police station, sheriff takes over, and then next thing you know, state police take over. It's getting quite common in some rural areas. So it's like, it's not surprising. You're right. It's almost like another epidemic happening in America as well, too. It's like police station shuts down, sheriff takes over, the next thing you know, it's the state police.
Yep, absolutely. And really all you're doing is spreading it out, making it thinner than it was before. So what we have with this, as he's trying to close out and just move to the next part of his life, things happen. There's a drug dealer, a very sophisticated drug situation going on. There's a murder, and one of his citizens in the village is beaten up pretty badly, and then she's accused of the murder, and he's trying to track this murder down. He's helping this lady who is actually a friend of his. She comes out of the hospital. She's suffering from PTSD, and so is he from his Vietnam days. And what happens to so many men when they go to retire, after so many years, they leave the war, and then things get in front of, the memories. They raise a family, they have a career, and then as the family grows up and the career goes away, the war comes back to them. So he's suffering from PTSD, and she is, and the two of them help each other get through it. Well, he's trying to help her get over the murder charge, and she's trying to help him sleep at night.
And when can we expect the new novel coming out?
I haven't. I'm hoping to have it out by the third quarter or so.
Okay.
This year.
Okay. Okay.
It just depends on publishing and so forth, you know.
Right, exactly. And also, you also done some short stories as well, too. And maybe you can just share just a few of the short stories, maybe ones that stand out, and, you know, a little bit about, you know, some of those. And, of course, it sounds like that I read a little bit of it. So it's like, you know, potentially you could be one of the great writers of the century.
Well, my mother isn't alive these days, but she'd love to hear you say that. I guess my favorite short story is called Monster in the Barn.
Monster in the Barn.
Monster in the Barn, and it's about a young boy in living on a farm in Ohio, and he's observing one of the farmhands who has a lot of problems, a lot of emotional problems, and so forth. And the kids tease around about him, and they see him in the barn one time coming out, and they said, "Oh, he's the monster," you know.
Oh no!
So yeah, so he's observing what's happening, you know, with his father's kindness towards this farmhand, and yeah, he's in a sense growing inside, understanding what happens to people, you know, that have those kind of problems, and it has a bit of a tragic end, but he grows from it. So that's one of my favorites.
Okay.
And another one of my another one is it takes place down in the same area that my novel is too. So.
Wow. Okay. And also too, where can we find you know, a good portion of your short stories?
Actually, I'm going to be posting them probably later this summer, and I'm thinking on a website, my website. I'm thinking also of combining them and trying to get those published by the end of the year in an anthology, you know, type of thing.
I'm looking forward to it as well too. Sounds like you got a lot of great material. Once again, author Thomas Brigger with Beyond the Higher Ground, the Mike Wagner Show. In just a few more minutes here, we'd love to have you back on sometime in 2020 and beyond. You've been great. And who are some of your favorite writers that you enjoyed growing up?
Well, growing up, it's kind of funny, which a lot of people think is heavy stuff, but William Faulkner was one that I always followed, and Ernest Hemingway. Currently, right now, I think John Grisham is a good storyteller. David Baldacci, you know, so you know, they all had an influence on how I write. John Irving is another one, you know.
Okay.
Good storyteller.
And what are your thoughts on Stephen King?
I like Stephen King. He's a good storyteller. He's great with suspense, and he's a good writer. He's successful. I'm not always, you know, in love with his style. You know, it gets a little dry sometimes, but he's done a good job. He's still writing too.
And it sounds like it as well too. And what are some of your favorite books that you enjoyed reading?
Well, probably if I was going to say the best book I ever read would be Moby Dick. If it's going way back into the old days. I got to tell you though, the one book that Faulkner wrote called Sanctuary is one that I probably read 3 or 4 times. And that was I always loved that book. And Hemingway's Farewell to Arms is the other one I remember. You know. And
it sounds like you got a lot of them as well too. And also just a couple of things here. What can we expect from you from 2020 and beyond? Besides, you know, getting your short stories together, your next book. What can we expect from you later in 2020 and beyond, like in 2021 or so?
Well, I'm going to keep writing. I think I finally figured out what I want to do in life. So I'm going to keep writing in probably another novel. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of one right now. So.
Oh, really? Okay. I guess we just heard right here on the Mike Wagner Show you're about to write another novel. So that's a good thing. So keep us up to date on that one. So, I mean, this is great, Thomas. I mean, I just getting some great ideas from you here. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
For writing, the biggest influence for me, I would have to say it'd be William Faulkner.
William Faulkner, okay. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Well, anybody who wants to write, I would say work on your characters.
Okay.
What I've learned so far in writing is I get the concept in mind where I want to go, You start building your characters, and pretty soon they start telling the story for you.
Mm-hmm. And that's really good advice as well, too. Once again, author Thomas Brigger of Beyond the Higher Ground here on the Mike Wagner Show. A big thank you for your time, Thomas. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. And once again, tell us about your upcoming projects, what's your website, how do people contact you, where can people purchase your books?
Easiest thing is to go to, the book has its own website. Is go to the beyondthehigherground.com, all one word.
Okay. All right.
And that's the easiest way. I have in there, synopsis of the book. There's chapter samples I'm going to read. And there are direct links to all of the online services to purchase the book. The book is available in print and in ebook form and Kindle. And also, we have an audio form that we did. I teamed up with Jack DeGolia, who's a very well-experienced reader and announcer, and the audio book is fantastic. Jack actually had to come up with almost 70 voices.
Wow, 70 voices!
Yeah, and when I heard Jack, one of my favorite characters of the book is a man named Cecil. He's a resident down in Southwest Virginia. And when I heard Jack do Cecil's voice, I said, "Okay, you're on, bud."
It sounds like you know. It sounds like he knows the person. That's fantastic.
Oh, I'm telling you, he just, I heard him do that, but he does a great job with the voices in there. Which, I mean, a lot of people are listening to books right now, including me. It's good to have that out there.
Okay, well, that's great. We're looking forward to your book as well too, and your other publications. Once again, Thomas, big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Do us a favor, keep us up to date. Love to have you back on 2020 and beyond. You've been fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.